Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This is 5 o'clock somewhere, certainly here on the west coast of the United States of America. Good evening. This is the wine day today, and we have a couple of great hosts join us. We're going to be talking about wine and some other things. We have a great guy from Dallas, Texas, that's join us. We have a wine buyer from a very eclectic or very elite, should I say, company called Elixir Funds that really specialize on buying the top of the wine on the market. And we have a great winemaker or owner of the Ram Cellars, Juan Mercado, a good friend of mine that also produces incredible wines here in California, in Napa Valley. And the wines are about 60 to 120 bucks a pop, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Unless you, okay. So that was the price years ago. The price went up, and Dylan and Kia will be leading the show this evening, and so let's go. So it's just like one more second here. I just want to thank you. That's what we're drinking tonight. This is the Reynolds Family Winery, 2007 Persistence. Jeff, do you know this wine?
No, actually, I don't.
All right, we'll be sending you a bottle.
I can get a virtual taste.
We'll be sending you a bottle. I said $350 a bottle.
We'll hold it really closely to the camera later so that you can try to pour it through.
All right, so let's go, Kia. Take the button and.
Let's go. So tonight we're going to start off talking about. We're actually going to explore both ends of the wine spectrum tonight. We're going to explore the really high end of the wine spectrum with Juan, and then we're also going to explore the very low end of the wine spectrum, going even into $2 Chuck category, because as you heard, they're actually raising the price.
Oh no!
Controversial. So first off, though, we'd like to start with our guest Juan and hear a little bit more about what you do and tell us about the wines that you produce.
Well, we have produced primarily Cabernet Sauvignon-based wines here from the Napa Valley. That's what the Valley does best. We focus, because we're virtual in a sense in that we don't have a winery, we don't own our own vineyards, we thought let's go after the very best vineyards. And so we've gone, most of our vineyards have been around for about 100 years, not more. So thus the higher price point. And,
right.
I've always felt wine isn't only about what you're drinking, but it's also the history and the story. And that's where I think, in our case, we don't have an estate, so we have to rely on that. And that's kind of our focus. So we make about 1,500 cases, 5 to 6 different wines, and we've been at it now for 10 years. So it's been a lot of fun, a lot of work, but a lot of fun.
That's great. Did you bring any of your bottles here with you tonight, or?
I did it. That's why I'm having
Yeah, exactly. What's that all about? That's like teasing us with something that we can't have.
I'm like the worst when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, no? Well, you didn't tell me what this was about.
I'm just kidding, buddy.
No, but so tell us again, where are your like, what are the names of the bottlings that you're making, and what are the estates? Where are they coming from?
Well, we have some proprietary name wines. So we have the Tempest, the Bard, and the Falstaff, and those are blends.
Okay.
And then we have our 3 vineyard designates, which are Dr. Crane, Borello Vineyard, and Tocolon.
Okay.
So, but all of our sources are throughout the Napa Valley, from as far south as Coombsville to as far north as Diamond Mountain. Diamond Mountain.
Diamond Mountain. Yes, make sure you're speaking out so everybody can hear.
Yeah.
Great. And are you the actual winemaker, or do you have someone making?
No, we have. I'm just the wine drinker. Our winemaker's Benoit Touquet. So he's been with us now for 2.5 years or so. So really excited to have him on board. Very talented guy. I've known him for a long time, and it's been a lot of fun to have him on board. So
tell us, why do you do this? Like, I know we're going to get into price points in a moment, but tell us, why is it important to you to make a $60 wine?
For me, it's not even about price point. It's one of those things that in the Napa Valley, I wanted to really be part of the community, and Napa Valley has some of the most expensive grape real estate.
True.
And so that leads to the higher price point. I wish I could make a wine.
So you don't have a choice.
You don't have a choice, no. there are, if you want to make wine from start to finish, you'll see other cabs out there for a much lower price point, but they're not, there's different markets and different ways of doing that. But in order to buy the fruit and produce the wine, unless you bought the wines unless you bought a vineyard in the 1970s or 1960s, for someone like me who got into it in the early 2000s, it's pricey. It's a very expensive proposition to do. But I wanted to be part of Napa, and it is what it is. But,
right.
And I suppose to be able to make a $10 bottle of wine, quantity is key. I mean, if you have 5 acre and you want to do a $10 bottle of wine, you can certainly do that, but you can eat yourself. There's no way you're going to be making money. I mean, this is all about quantity.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and then why don't we go ahead and bring our other guests into the loop into this conversation, because joining us virtually is Jeff Siegel. And Jeff, we've known for a long time. He's a nationally known wine writer. His work has appeared on the internet, in wine magazines, in newspapers. He's written for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Is that correct, Jeff? For a number of years?
That's exactly right. We used to have a food section.
Yes. He used to have a food section. And he's been a regular wine judge in wine competitions and has been writing professionally since high school. And he counts high school because he actually has been getting paid for it since high school. So,
hey, I've been covering high school basketball a whole lot longer than I care to remember.
Jeff, if you read any of his columns, though, is a huge proponent of lower priced wines, value wines. He frequently writes columns that focus on the best wines under $10, for example, is a big believer in screw caps. And so, Jeff, what are your thoughts on wine pricing and the difference between a $60 bottle and a $10 bottle?
Well, the first thing I want to say to you is this is a real treat for me, because I started out with typewriters and carbon paper in a newspaper business. So when I get to do this is a big deal. All this virtual stuff, I'm very, very impressed.
Well, cheers.
By the way, I have some Texas wine here.
Oh,
Tempranillo.
tell us what's in your glass before you
Tempranillo La Herencia from McPherson Cellars in Lubbock.
How much?
10 or $12.
Okay,
great.
And actually, it just did very well. There was a big barbecue contest in Seattle. Tanner Raskin at the Seattle Weekly, an old pal of mine, they did some Texas wines against Washington State wines and California wines, and this was actually judged the best to go with brisket.
Wow, very cool.
Congratulations.
No,
that's good.
The thing about wine pricing is there's not a right or a wrong. There's quality wine at $10. There's quality wine at $60. There's quality wine at $200. The thing about my point, and what I've always tried to do, is that American consumers are terrified of wine. That's why we drink so little of it, right? The average American adult drinks 1 bottle of wine a month. And so, to give you an idea, I know how much I drink a month. I'm sure you guys all drink almost as much as I do, right? So most Americans don't drink wine. And they think you got to spend $50, $60 to have a great bottle of wine. And this is not saying there's not great wine at $60. Napa Valley, it's very difficult to find a bad bottle of wine made in the Napa Valley.
Exactly.
Right?
Absolutely.
It's just, you can't, California, European winemakers always ask me, what do you think is a great vintage in Napa? And then before I can answer, they always go, well, they answer their own question. They go, that's right, it's Napa. There are no bad vintages.
That's right.
Right? It's not like France where it actually gets cold some years or whatever. Yeah. So all I try to do is say to consumers, you don't have to start with $60. You don't have to start with $100. Start with $5. See what's out there. If you like that, then try 7, then try 10. Work your way up. Try to figure out what's going on. One of my other things, and hopefully we can talk about this later, is I just don't think there's enough wine education in the U.S. And I just don't think the wine industry does a good enough job of educating consumers about what to look for. You want to buy a car. there's 27 trillion car guides on how to buy a car. You want to buy a bottle of wine, you're pretty much out of luck. So hopefully that's kind of the thing I try to.
There are guides, but wine is much more subjective, I suppose, in some ways than a car. Like a car, okay, it has this feature and that feature and turns on and turns at this radius. With a wine, it's much more, I guess, loosely opinion-based, no?
Yeah, no, that's true, but don't you think, and Tia, you've been in the wine business for a long time, but don't you think if you walk into a grocery store and you're looking at all the people there staring at the literally thousands of bottles of wines on the shelf, don't you think they're confused? Don't you think they'd like to have something that can say, I'm having X for dinner, this wine will go with it? And that's the kind of thing that's really difficult to find. Because we sell wine different way than that.
Well, it seems to me that you and I and some people are shopping at different places, right? I mean, the way I'm listening to you here, I'm hearing is you're more talking, because of the price points, you're more talking about supermarkets and things like that. Well, if you go to a wine shop here in California, in Napa, for instance, I mean, you have people that are going to be able to lead you out or lead you into the right stuff. So,
well,
I mean, depends where you're going, right?
No, that's very true, and also you guys got to remember, you live in California.
Yes.
When it comes to buying wine, you're spoiled.
Yes,
we are.
There is no place like California in the rest of the country. You can't buy wine in a grocery store in New York.
Absolutely.
Here you can go for a wine tasting in a grocery store.
Right. So where are your wines primarily sold, and what kinds of consumers do you think you're reaching?
Well, I mean, most of our stuff we sell direct, but we do have some retail presence, and typically they are more of the fine wine shops where someone will explain and tell the story, a little bit of the history.
Right.
But I think the price point that you were talking about is a price point that you see at. It's kind of like going to a Home Depot rather than your local hardware store. Your local hardware store, you might pay a little bit extra, but you're going to get that assistance. And at a Home Depot, you pretty much you're getting a deal, but you're kind of on your own.
Right.
And I think if you're going out and you're buying that lower price point wine, you're probably going to a much bigger market where you're on your own, and sometimes you'll see it stacked on these pallets, and you're going to get a deal, but it's hard to get someone that actually knows each of the wines that are being shown or presented there. And so here we're lucky in the Napa Valley or in a lot of metropolitan areas, you go where it's a fairly educated, affluent consumer base. You're going to these shops where they can actually tell you what the difference is between that $10 bottle and that $200 bottle. When you get away from that, you're on your own.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the challenge is for a lot of people. I've always told our consumers when they ask, how should I buy wines? What do you recommend? I always tell them, find a local shop that has a great selection, where the people that are running the place and actually taste through the wines. Because if they know your palate, and they'll figure it out after a while. They'll recommend you wines, and you'll tell them, I really like this. Right,
you'll go in and they'll hear what you like after a while, and they'll get to know you.
And what you didn't like, and they'll be able to guide you through that. But that's, at the lower price point, it's hard to, you're talking numbers, and you're talking to bigger beverages and more, and places like that, which are great, but you kind of, when I go to one of those places, I know that I'm specifically looking for a specific type of bottle of wine.
But they do have still good wines. I mean, like 150 bucks and 200 bucks, and they do have access to that too.
No, they have. I bought some great wines at some of the bigger, the Costco's of the world, and they carry some of the greatest wines.
Sure.
But you're all, and you're getting a great deal on those, but you're also on your own.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a good tip and a good point, which is something that Eric Asimov, who's the writer for the New York Times, is one of his big tips in his new book, How to Love Wine, is about finding, someone that you can trust and getting to know that proprietor at your local wine shop and establishing a relationship there. There was also something, though, and my mind goes to something I was just reading actually in a local chat room, Tyler Ballier, who is with Wine Riot. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Wine Riot. Mm-hmm. They produce a series of wine events around the country and largely aimed at the millennial audience. There's a lot of talk about millennials now and their interest in wine and their love of wine. And there's a little bit of a controversy brewing over the fact that, I guess, a question mark over, are millennials truly willing to spend money on wines? And some say yes. Or are they, broke still because they're paying off school or they're just getting started and they don't have a car or whatever that may be, and they can only afford entry-level wines. Do you guys have any opinions on that?
I mean, when I was 25, 26 years old, honestly, I was drinking white Zinfandel. You're out of college and you're just starting to get into it, or you're drinking Rieslings, are definitely the less expensive stuff.
I love that this man just admitted that he was drinking white Zinfandel. Because we've all been there, and there's nothing wrong with that.
We've all, you kind of work your way up, but even then, you have to, and it's very, very rare that you get someone that is 24, 25 years old and wants a case of $100 bottles of wine. That just doesn't. We all wish we could do that.
That's exactly right, and that's the point that I try to make in my wine writing. When you learn to drive, you don't drive a Ferrari in driver's ed. You don't go to a first growth. You don't go to a Cult Napa Cabernet. You got to go. You start out simply, and the wine business doesn't do a good enough job of explaining to people that that's okay. You just said you drank white Zinfandel, and believe me, we're all very enlightened here, and we think that's terrific. But you can imagine, right? You can imagine how many people there are taking deep breaths and going, "Oh my God, it's a Napa winery, and he drank white Zinfandel." Because we've got people so scared.
And it's making a comeback even. There are a few producers who are making Zinfandel.
Has an incredible palate. Yeah, incredible.
Let me ask you this.
Sorry, John. Yeah.
No. If it's orange juice, right? Does anybody care? Does anybody cross-question you about which orange juice you drink?
Yeah, no, never. They ask me what the bubbly is that's going into the orange juice to make the mimosa,
and that's just it, man. We've got everybody. All we got to do is take a deep breath and realize if you start drinking white Zinfandel, you may very well end up making high-quality Napa Valley wine, and that's terrific. And if you only drink white Zinfandel, that's fine too. We got to stop scaring people. We have to stop making people afraid to drink wine.
So, Jeff, tell us a little bit about this passion that you have. Obviously, you're very opinionated, which we love, and we're hearing that. You're trying to turn this into a book. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you very much for asking that, too. I appreciate it. I do a blog called The Wine Curmudgeon, winecurmudgeon.com. I've been doing it for 5 years. What everyone says is very true. There's very little money on the internet. So, can I drop a name here?
Of course, please.
So, I sent George Tabor an email. George is the guy who wrote The Judgment of Paris, the movie The Bottle Shock was based on. And I said, George, is there any market for wine books? Because, you do wine books all the time. He just did a great book about the publisher made him call it bargain wine because you still can't call it cheap wine. And I said, is there any market for this? And he goes, yeah, there's a great market. He said, but you don't need to mess with a publisher, Jeff. You need to do it yourself. You need to self-publish. And I said, George, I can't. I've had many writing careers. I did some books in the late 80s and early 90s. Some of the best books you've never read because, they didn't get any a book about the movie Casablanca for its 50th anniversary, a book about American fictional detectives. So if we want to talk about what wine Sam Spade drank, we can get into that later. And George said you need to do it yourself. So I looked into this, and it occurred to me that technology has changed so much. It's much easier than it used to be. There's not a stigma with self-publishing. So I'm on Kickstarter right now, about 18% after 5 or 6 days, about 18%. So if anybody wants to make a donation, great premiums. If you go to Kickstarter and do a search for Wine Curmudgeon, it'll come up, The Wine Curmudgeon's Guide to Cheap Wine. And basically, it's the sort of things that we've been talking about here. It's the idea that if you have a base, if you understand what's going on, if you understand why wine costs a certain amount, why real estate in Napa Valley is expensive, why real estate in the Central Valley is not expensive, so that's one of the reasons why there's a difference in price. If you understand these things, then you can educate yourself and make your own choices. And those are the things I think that's what I've been trying to do for the 20 some odd years I've been writing about wine. So Kickstarter, winecurmudgeon.com, great premiums. In fact, one of the premiums, I have to say, I will do a guided tour of a wine store.
Nice. Very good.
So
excellent.
if we can go to the cheap wine section, we can go to the expensive wine section. We can talk about anything you want. Italian wine, because that's really one of the toughies. I may have to get the telephone out and call my buddy, the Italian wine guy, on that. But it's the idea that this is just a wonderful way to do a book, and I'm actually very excited about it. Without going into too much detail and embarrassing people, but I've dealt with publishers and agents, and I don't ever want to deal with publishers and agents ever again.
Well, good for you for striking out on your own. One thing, though, that comes to mind when we're talking about value wine is there's all this talk about terroir, and we're talking about educating people, and if you want people to progress in what they're drinking, or this idea that as they, move through their wine education, that eventually they're going to go on and want to try more expensive wines. How is it that people make that progression, or how do you begin to teach them about terroir if you're essentially starting off drinking bulk wine? I don't know. What would be your recommendations on that?
Well, okay, I'll say two things. First off, not all $10 wine is bulk wine. I think if you look, I'll tell you, in California, I think Bogle does an absolutely tremendous job of wines that have the certain interest that you're talking about, Tia, and they're all $10. I think if you go to places in Europe with less expensive real estate.
I was going to say there's a lot of great French wines.
If you go to Languedoc, excuse me, I always mispronounce. I always say Languedoc badly.
But Jeff, it seems to me that Bogle is as close as you can be from bulk wine, though. I mean, this is the California appellation. I mean, that's coming up. The fruit is coming up from left and right?
But if you compare, if you compare Bogle to something made by Constellation, something made by Gallo, something made by Treasury, I think you'll notice a difference. I think you can taste the Bogle Petite Syrah, and it will taste like Petite Syrah. It will not taste like a wine that's been designed by a committee and then manipulated to fit a certain flavor profile.
All right. Okay. Now I understand your definition of bulk wine. All right. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. Hey, believe me, if you read the blog every single week, I get email and junk all the time telling me to be nicer to bulk California wine.
Don't let it out. Absolutely.
Gosh, how many times you get a taste of Central Coast Merlot, and they all taste exactly the same. They don't taste like Merlot. But anyway, if you look in Sicily, if you look in southern France, if you look in other parts, Umbria, Riccardo Cottarelli, Falesco, those wines have terroir. They're $10. If you let's see, where else? Spain. There are Crianzas from Rioja, the basic level of Tempranillo in Spain. My God, they're fabulous. $10.
Yeah.
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
So the wines are out there. They're interesting because I don't like crappy wine. I don't recommend crappy wine. Just because it's cheap doesn't mean I like it. It's got to have something interesting. It's got to have something going on with it.
Right, and the two don't have to be mutually exclusive. Just because it's $10 doesn't mean it's bad, necessarily.
Right, and it's a two-way street. As I always say, there's some really crappily made $10 wines, and there's some really crappily made $100 wine.
Agreed.
It's just easier. It's just easier. You're less embarrassed if you have a crappy $10 wine.
Boris, do you have any thoughts on this? You've been awfully quiet over here.
Yeah, well, no, I was just letting you guys talk about it. So obviously, I agree with you, Jeff. I think it brings like entry level price wine to bring a lot of people into the wines, like whether it's like white Zinfandel or the wines, you get from there to maybe like Merlot and then go on to other wines. But my question to you, Jeff, so obviously your concept of cheap wine. So what's cheap for you? Like there's like a price like $10, you said?
I think it's about 10 or 12 bucks. Yeah, I think now the interesting thing about the recession is that it pretty much destroyed the market for wine between 10 and 12 and $20. What had happened, at least from what I noticed, was before the recession, the big wine companies had all decided they were going to raise prices, and you had a lot of really awful, really badly made $15, $16 wine. And that stuff pretty much went away during the recession. So now I think what you've got is terrific wine, 10, 12 bucks, and then 15, 18, 20. And in the middle of that, it's very hard to find. It's very hard to find something that's well made.
I don't know what to check on that because I think everything I've seen still shows that $10 to $15 category is still really growing, across the board. But I don't know. Maybe in your neck of the woods, you've seen something different.
Well, it seems to me like, talking with friends and things like that here in Napa Valley, I think it seems like we're going to come up to a shortage of grapes. And the bulk wine won't be bulk wine necessarily anymore. I mean, that's, a bulk wine from California, from Napa Valley, with a great origin. You're mentioning the Crianzas and all that. They're definitely coming up from, the Rioja, but finding like a bulk wine from Napa itself, for instance, if you have to bring this, boil it down to a region, to an appellation, it's going to get very, very difficult for the next few years.
Well, and this ties into the $2 Chuck story. For those of you that didn't hear this week, there was a story out there about Trader Joe's and their very popular, well-known $2 Chuck wine. Was actually going up a whole 50 cents. and apparently the wine has been priced at a higher price point around the country at other places for a very long time. But in California, people were truly seeing it at a $1.99 price point, and now it's going up to, $2.50. So I don't know if it's going to be $2.50 Chuck or, Chuck 2.5 or, what people are going to name it now.
Well, the only way they can keep the name is like if they give a discount on the case. They're going back to.
I heard the name Upchuck.
Upchuck. Okay, Upchuck is another one.
2.5 Chuck. Yeah.
Be careful. You don't want Fred Franzia coming after you guys.
But yeah. Does that have to do, just a question mark, it's really not explicitly said, but maybe it's a result of a shortage of grapes and bulk wine.
Yeah, and to me this is like, just makes the cost of my meal going up because this is exactly the wine I'm using for cooking. Those ones are even cheaper than the bulk wine that you have from Gallo and all that. That's,
Yeah. Now that's
I don't think it was. $2, as you say, it was $2 in California, but I heard it can be up to like $6 on certain areas on the East Coast.
Really?
The East
that
Coast?
Expensive?
The
yeah,
East Coast.
it's as much as $3.50 elsewhere.
And I think if you look at $2 Chuck, I think it's an incredible marketing success above all.
It's absolutely.
It's what it's all about.
It's a genius marketing idea.
Because actually I know people behind it. I actually talk to them, and the idea is very, very simple. Was how can we bring a bottle of wine for the same price as a bottle of water to give people the option between both, which is obviously looking at one as like a part of a daily lifestyle or whatever you want to name it, and how do we get to that price, which is how they got to do the $2 shot project,
Right.
So it's not $2, but it's again it brings people into wine. I don't think it's necessarily the best wine in the marketplace, but it's I think we can all be thankful for what it does to the wine industry and to bring people into drinking wine.
Absolutely.
On a regular basis.
It's a gateway wine.
But one more thing I want to ask Jeff, because for me, and I've been in the wine business for a few years. I've been in the retail business of the wine for a few years. And I agree with you. I used to have like a wine shop I used to run in Spokane, Washington, of all places, and not being there all the time, I had about 800 different wines on the. It was like a specialty store,
Yeah.
and I used to put like pinpoint like best of the moment or whatever in order to give the idea of like people would come in and be able to know what they will. What I would drink.
Yeah.
And I had like a big section of $10, which I think there's a great market for it. But for me, value, and that's kind of what I want to mention. For me, value can be found at $10, $50, and $100. And I think it's kind of like hard to tell because people who think $100, there's no way to justify it as a value, you know. But Juan and I mean, we all know here like the price of certain grapes, which makes $100 bottle of wine sometimes much higher in price as far as cost-wise than a $10 bottle of wine if you do the ratio. You know, I mean, you got like $10 that you produce for like $2 versus sometimes you can have like $30, $40 into production for upper hand wines. You know.
Sure.
Absolutely. No, I don't want you guys to get the wrong idea. I don't have anything against expensive wine. I drink expensive wine. No, my guilty secret, okay? I love white Burgundy. Okay? I've got some Pullini in the wine fridge right now. I've got some O2s there, and in a couple of more years, I may even taste one. But but for most Americans, it's not that there's not great expensive wine, but most Americans don't understand that, and so they see $2 Chuck, they see an opportunity to taste something that seems to be not intimidating, and that if they don't like it, they can throw it out.
So this brings up an interesting topic, and if any of my other wine writer friends out there are listening, hopefully you won't get angry at me right now, but that it makes me think about a lot of the wine writing that we see today is actually geared toward higher end wines. I mean, there are some outlets that focus on $20 and under, but even $20 for a lot of people is an expensive bottle of wine. So, and really, if you're looking at, talking to consumers about wines, $12 and under, that, it really seriously narrows the field of publications that are truly interested in focusing on those kinds of wines. Right, but I mean, is this a problem then? Is the, wine industry talking to itself? On the one hand, you have writers who are saying, oh, it's all about terroir, and, we need to, we can't talk about this bulk stuff, and that's all just mass-produced.
I'll tell you exactly what it is.
Yeah, and so therefore, well, just let me finish for a moment. It's left in the hands of the producers then sometimes of these bulk products to really push them out, but then at the same time, they're sort of blamed for mass marketing these low-end wines. So, what gives there? How do we solve that problem?
I will tell you, and I've said this many times, and so far no one's hit me too hard. Most wine writers want to be famous. Most wine writers want to be Robert Parker. And and so you're not going to get to be Robert Parker writing about Yellowtail. You're only get to be Robert Parker writing about wine that is expensive. Fortunately, I don't have those problems. I used to be a sports writer, so I started at the bottom. But I honestly think that's part of the problem too. And I've said this many times. That's part of the problem with the wine business. We don't have enough people willing to say, this is the way wine is. This is understandable. But everybody starts with toasty and oaky and redolent of leather and tobacco. And how many times, and I'm sure every single one of you has had this happen, how many times have you started to talk about wine with somebody who doesn't know a whole lot about wine, and the very first thing they do is apologize to you for not knowing anything about wine?
Which is something else that has actually, you talked about toasty and oaky, and I keep seeing more and more stories being written today as well about the fact that wine reviews are changing, and we need to throw out the 100-point system, or we need to come up with new vocabulary to talk to people about wine, or that there shouldn't be wine reviews anymore. So, I mean, what are all of your thoughts on that?
I just want to clarify something, that I've moved on from white Zinfandel. I just wanted to clarify that. I've moved on to Johannesburg Riesling, so so just for me to say that. No, I mean, I think wine is. There's two things about wine, and I think that's what people forget. In most of the world, wine is a beverage.
Right.
We in the U.S. and our culture romanticize it. So it's easier to write about expensive wines because the story's already there, the history's already there. But you don't realize that in Europe, it's a beverage, and I think that's why it's viewed a little bit differently here, and it's hard for someone to get excited about wine at a $5 price point just because we don't view it as I do, but I think that's the general public doesn't view it as a beverage.
Sure.
You see what I mean?
Of
So
course.
it's like, why should I get excited about this wine? This wine I can never afford, but that one's like $50.
But you're right, it's cultural too. We didn't grow up like they did in Europe with a $5 bottle of wine or whatever on the table all the time.
So,
And
what is for both of you actually? What is the difference between a Natty Point $15 bottle of wine and a Natty Point $150 bottle of wine? Is that is that the same Natty Point?
You've just illuminated the problem with scores and why they make no sense. Every $100 bottle of wine should be 95 points.
So tell us
what do you mean by that? Yeah.
Okay. If someone goes to that much trouble, if the grapes are of the quality of the $100 bottle of wine, the grapes are. And if the winemaker is as talented, because believe me, they don't let people like me make $100 wine. So for that wine not to be 95 points every time is either a flaw in the winemaking process or a flaw in the scoring process. And once again, I get to drink a lot of expensive wine because of what I do. And there's nothing wrong with the wine. It's a flaw in the scoring process.
So
That's
how
why
do
you'll
you
never
fix
see
that? What's the flaw? I mean, if it's all subjective anyway, none of our taste buds are exactly alike, just like none of our fingerprints are exactly alike, right? So how do you solve that problem?
Well, you solve it by getting rid of scores and by explaining this is what the wine tastes like. And if you like these flavors, you'll like this wine. I was at a wine dinner several years ago. The retailer just went, he didn't like that.
No. I have a question for you. No.
Sure.
I actually agree
Quietly
with you.
getting fired up over here. I like it.
No. My question is then, how do you for yourself? I have a question for you. How do you, in your book, how do you present the wines if you don't use the score system? Because I think we can criticize it as much as we want, but for people who, as you said yourself, feel shy about knowing what they like, it's a way to help them to make a decision anyway. I honestly don't know anybody that's really focused on the content of what you write about the wine as much as about, okay, how many points did you get, Like it's obviously, I'm sure one we prefer
and the reason is I think Americans are just used to having some sort of measurement, some sort of grade, and it's got to be simple. It starts in elementary school, A, B, C, D,
Well, I
got a lot of F's.
maybe where the controversy comes in, though, is that we've gone too far. You've seen the videos that have been out recently poking fun where winemakers are reading wine reviews that were written by the Wine Spectator, and they read them and they're very dramatic, like my night at the Moulin Rouge smoking a cigar with and they're going on and on, and they're very over the top. So, I mean, maybe that's what's caused this,
but
sort of backlash.
That's part of what you say. That's part of creating a story around the wine. I mean, technically, when you make super high-end wine, you obviously don't just make wine. You want to express something. There's a story behind that type of wine, and the writer, obviously, whether or not it's right or wrong, buy into that idea and kind of accentuate this idea of such and such. But again, my question is to you, Jeff. And it's just an honest question. How do you plan to present your guide as far as not using the 100-point system, for example?
Okay, well, and I do that all the time. I do 52 wines of the week, and I do I do on the blog. I do 52 wines of the week. I do for holidays. I include wines, and what I do is I say this is what it tastes like, If it's a Sauvignon Blanc, you'll get a little bit of this, and you'll get a little bit of that, and you'll get a little bit of this. And if you don't like this, then don't drink it. That's what I'm saying. I did a wine dinner several years ago with Barbara Worley, who was the first woman MS or MW. I always get them confused here in Dallas. And she had me there and several other people who were big wine geeks. And I was talking to this couple next to me, and I said I write about wine, and they wanted to know about it. And I said I don't use scores. And they said, well, how does anybody know whether the wine's any good? And I said, well, because I described the wine, and you could see the light bulb go off over their head. This was just revolutionary to them to describe what the wine tastes like in language people can understand.
Right. So it's about getting people to try it.
Cabernet is a perfect example. You give a Cabernet 92 points. What does that mean? And it doesn't even matter what it costs. If I don't like Cabernet, 92 is irrelevant. I need to know, are the tannins really harsh? I need to know what's the fruit, what's the acid. 92 is, once again, I'm talking to people who, what is the Wine Market Council numbers? 90% of the wine in this country is consumed by 20% of the population. It's the other 80% I'm worried about.
But your style of writing needs for your readership to understand what it means. When you say that the wine is very tannic, what does it mean to me? I need to buy the wine and try it.
I do explain what tannic is. I have a category on the blog called Wine Terms, and I'll link, when it says tannins, I'll link to tannins, and they can click on that, and they'll see, here's what a tannin is, and here's the astringent thing in the back of your mouth.
But I'm not talking about the level of intensity of the tannins. If you were to write this one is very tannic, surely coming up from the hillside and all that, whatever, to me, if I buy the wine, I taste the wine, I'm like, well, that's not very tannic. So now I have to gauge myself, through your palate to understand what you're saying.
And that's the other, as Tia noted, that's the difference between wine and cars. Cars are a whole lot more objective.
Right, exactly.
For sure.
Well, there's a lot of, like I said, people out there who are thinking that this whole system needs to be changed, and in particular with, word of mouth, with, the World Wide Web, just like what we're doing here, and having this conversation, knowing that friends' recommendations are more powerful now than any sort of advertising. I wonder what everybody here thinks, and I'm sorry, Juan, it looks like we're losing you.
I have to speak out. Jeff, it was great to meet you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
I actually sent Miss Worley an email just a couple of days ago, so I'm looking forward to meeting her next time I'm in Dallas.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juan.
We appreciate it. Juan Mercado, yes.
That one. Send me a couple of cases, will you? What is the most expensive one you have?
No, but I mean, it's just, I'm trying to remember where it was, but the bottom line is, we've got word of mouth, we've got the web, we've got internet sharing, we've got everyday people writing reviews. Going back to Wine Riot, they've developed an app so that all of the people who attend their events are actually able to go on and rate which wines at that event were their favorites and why, and then those can be, looked at again later. So, I'm just curious, is the wine reviewer going away? Do we think that the expert will fade away? How do we think this is going to change over time? And for all of you out there who may be listening or watching right now, tweet us at 5, the number 5, IVE o'clock, or at Tooth Social, TOUTSOCIAL, if I can spell out loud. I feel like I'm in a spelling bee all of a sudden. This is like a test.
Correctly.
Did I do that right? I need more wine. And please let us know what you think, because we'd love for you to jump in on this conversation. But so, what does the group here think? Do we think that wine reviewers are irrelevant? Do we think that the 100-point system has gone by the wayside? What's the feeling?
No, I think there's definitely a great market for what Jeff is trying to do, and I think it's definitely something that's not being very approached, from a one reviewer type of people. But then again, I do believe that there's a purpose for the system how it is right now because it gives a sense of confidence to a lot of people, you know.
Right.
Right.
And then and you also bring a sense of competition to you know. I mean, you want to make sure. I mean, I don't say that the wine. I mean, personally, I think the wines made today are by far the best wines ever made.
Yeah,
No question asked.
in some ways, it's hard to find a bad bottle.
And I think, you know, I mean,
right.
I as much as I wish, like fine wine would be cheaper. In the same time, there's here in Napa a lot of competition in between wineries, vineyards, and such, which raise up the bar to next level each and every time, you know. And so it's a double-edged sword because you do have this like counterpoint system, which is criticized on one hand, but then it does motivate a lot of people to do better wine.
Of course. But I guess what brings to mind, and I'm sorry, I want to hear what you have to say too.
No,
why don't you go first, and then I'll bring up what
Well,
I'm
I was
thinking.
just going to say, for me as a consumer and learning about wine, the point system helped me. The higher the points, the more balanced I thought the wine would be, and typically was or is. Until I learned more about the different styles and the different types when I first got started, that was really the only marker because there weren't any. I would read the bottles. There weren't any description on the bottles. I'd pick up a bottle and go, okay, it's a Merlot, and it would, you know, say Merlot grapes, and sometimes it would be a blend, but there would be no other descriptors. And so the only thing I had to go by was the point system,
Right.
and the price point. And
That's part of the vast conspiracy to confuse consumers.
Go ahead.
Well, I think what I was going to bring up was also with wine, we're working in the three-tier system, right? And a lot of people claim that the reason the point system has survived as long as it had is primarily because of distributors and the value that certain groups of people within the industry put on those reviews versus looking at the consumer necessarily, or even how the consumer is evolving today. So any thoughts on that?
Well, I kind of agree with that. I mean, this is like you're going fishing and putting bait around the boat, you know, hoping like, you know, all the fish are going to come up and eat, and you have this big net, and you're going to capture all that, right? So you do like, you know, I remember like some, you know, some going to like some wine shops and looking at, you know, the signs and even the sign wasn't even corresponding to the wine on the shelf. The year was different. You know, that was a 95 points. That was a 95 points, but that was last year, 2 years ago. And people are not paying attention to that. And the guys like, you know, you know, it happened, and just I know a lot of, you know, and that's a shame. I mean, that's but yeah, I totally understand that. You know, chef talkers, you know, are really, unless you go to a place like Backroom Wine, where Dan will write all his tasting notes by hand. Right. So this is like a really different. I mean, the guys are really on top of the game here doing that. But you have plenty of other like unscrupulous. That's English, right?
Yes. Unscrupulous.
Scrupulous.
I feel like we're writing a novel now.
Retailers that will do that, and it's just laziness and taking people for morons, and those people really hurt the business.
Yeah.
Period.
But if you're a wine buyer, you figure that out pretty soon, even if you don't know anything about the wines, because there were shops that I went to that did things like that, and I would refuse to go because after I've been stung or get a bottle of wine that's off or not what it said it was, I never went back. I would go back to a smaller shop that had someone who would talk to me.
So I'm going to go out on a limb, and some people are going to say, oh, well, you come from a wine marketing background, so of course you're going to say that. But, you know, I would love to see the day, and I've only seen it once or twice during my career, where the review of a wine or the feature of a wine in Style or In Touch magazine showed up on a wine shelf in a wine shop. Only because if we've got, you know, 80% or whatever of the wine in this country being purchased by women, for example, or, you know, because you don't even see this in a grocery store, you know, and I think why don't people capitalize on that celebrity factor or the, you know, the reviews and publications that are reaching millions of people versus the publications that are only reaching the, 10% of the top wine buyers in the country.
Tia, you've just defined my life's work.
Well, I have a soft spot for that too. It's just a personal.
We have to take wine out of the hands of a bunch of old white guys like myself and give it to people who all these younger people than I am who want to learn about it, who want to drink it. I'm sorry, I'm terrible at names. Sitting next to Tia, I'm sorry.
Oh, Deline. Yes.
You said something truly genius, truly brilliant, and I have to tell you, you're a better person than most Americans, because you had an off wine, right?
That's going to
You
go
had
over.
an off wine, and you figured it was the fault of the retailer.
Yes.
How many people, when they have an off wine, are going to drink that and then not drink wine again because all wine tastes lousy because some retailer had left a crappy out just today. National specialty foods chain, I'll say it, Sprouts doesn't bother me. I'm in Sprouts today in Dallas. They've got a 2008 red Bicyclette on the shelf that they've marked down to $7 or whatever the hell it is, and God knows it cost them $1 or $2 because it was so old. So some poor slob's going to buy that and think they're getting a great deal, and then they're going to taste it and it's going to be oxidized.
Right.
Yes.
And they're going to think all wine tastes like that, and they're never going to buy wine again.
That's true. That's a problem. I've seen that with very, very good wines still, too, on the shelf, knowing that I see the vintage and you're going, ooh, what's that vintage still doing there? Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that, if that was a good shop and if the person was, understood that the wine was oxidized and understood that, that was the reason of that, surely, there is a chance that the shop may want to do good and in exchange at least the faulty wine. Like in California, you cannot come back here
and I don't disagree with you, but let me ask you this. You've been in a restaurant, you've gotten a corked wine, and you know what you're talking about. You got a French accent to boot. Do they argue with you about returning the wine?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so if they do it to you, and it's happened, I can't tell you how many times it's happened to me, where I go, excuse me, but this wine is corked or it's oxidized. Oh, no, that wine's perfectly fine. And they argue with me, and then I got to tell them I do this for a living, and then they still argue with me. What do they do to ordinary consumers?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're running out of time here, but go ahead.
Well, no, I think it's just bad customer service. I mean, it's like going and say, hey,
exactly.
actually happened to me a couple of days ago. I bought some cheese and then realized that the date was past due, and you take it back and say, I'm sorry, I just bought it. And yeah, I mean, customer service,
But she's okay.
Exactly.
Do what?
But she is okay. I have a question that, and we can keep going the conversation, doesn't matter. Hey, Jeff, what is, in your opinion, the future of that kind of wine, the tender? Because you guys in Texas are starting ready to plant vineyard and make wine, but that's not just Texas. This is eventually the whole United States of beautiful America is going to turn into a big vineyard.
Wine is made in all 50 states, and I will note that I'm the founder of a group called co-founder of a group called Drink Local Wine, which is about American regional wine. I think the future of cheap wine is very, very good. Technically, it's never been better, and you guys know this, especially being from France. We don't get, especially in California, there's no more green wine. It's amazing because when I started drinking wine and you bought some wines and if they were unripe, there's nothing you could do about it because they were the grapes were unripe. That doesn't happen anymore. Technically, wine's never been better. And I think as more people figure out how to do this, we're going to see more and better, not just cheap wine, but $15 wine, $20 wine, $100 wine.
It's true. There are fewer and fewer flawed wines, it seems like. We're closing that gap, slowly but surely. Yeah. Absolutely.
What do you think, Boris?
About what?
About cheap wine. I mean, cheap wine, affordable bargain wines. I mean, you think this is something that is going to pick up?
Yeah, I think ultimately, if you were to go to a point of, because Jeff, you talk about cheap wine from like Languedoc-Roussillon in France, or like Sicily and in Italy, or Rioja in Spain, and all these parts. But you know what? If you go to these regions, you're going to see what we call in French co-op, which is a single winery where all the producers go and make the wine over there, which you don't have in America, you know. And that's how, I mean, I'm in the market, I sell what people would consider extremely expensive wines. I won't even tell you the price, it's just crazy. But I have a guy I work with, because I do a lot of sales with Asia, and he does the opposite. He sells anywhere between $1 to $2 bottle of wine, and he has a huge selection. You know, all come from Europe, obviously, and from France and all these places. But you can't get that type of wine here because it's not set up the same as for producing the wine. You don't have like co-op wineries where people, like let's say in Texas, where like a bunch of people can just go and harvest the grapes and age the wine.
Well, you start to have this. It's called custom crush facilities.
No, but custom crush.
You got the Napa Valley Wine Company.
Yeah, but that's for upper end wines. I mean, custom crush is not for like $10 bottle of wine. There's no way you can do that.
And to your point, it's great to seek out those values from those regions that you both mentioned, Languedoc-Roussillon or Spain, etc. But it's interesting because it depends on where you are in the country again. You know, we're very limited. The amount of wine that's imported to us from those places is often quite small. And particularly on the West Coast here where Two Sweet is, we often don't see a large selection of wines from the European regions like they do on the East Coast, for example, you know, because they're a little closer to Europe.
I always say all the best cheap Italian wine stays in New York. But I'll tell you what, you guys should be able to get Terraquet out there from Gascony.
Okay, I haven't had it myself.
Terraquet?
Terraquet is great. And then the Falescos should be out there too, and those are great $10 wines as well from Umbria, Riccardo Cottarella.
Well, Jeff, thank you again for being on. Give us the site so that people can find your Kickstarter project in case they're interested in supporting your book cause.
Oh, outstanding. The blog is winecurmudgeon.com, and there's a link on there directly to the Kickstarter site. And if you just want to go to Kickstarter directly, that's a very long URL with some numbers, but if you go to Kickstarter and just do a search for Wine Curmudgeon, it'll be there. And hey, great premiums, and I promise not to be like those guys on public television and be really annoying about it.
Only $19.99.
You know,
does it come with a free ShamWow? The ShamWow keeps coming up. We start getting royalties for the ShamWow. The second time now on 5 o'clock somewhere the ShamWow has been brought up. But
I'm very fascinated by what you're doing, and I have one question very quickly, and it may take maybe a little bit longer to answer that, but you seem to be a different of consumers, wine consumers, and what are your feelings about direct shipping?
About what?
Direct shipping. Very, very briefly, I think the three-tier system is evil, and I think that American consumers should be allowed to buy wine just like they buy tennis shoes and computers over the internet. But however, we're stuck with what we've got, and we have to work under the system that we have. So that makes direct shipping more difficult than it should be and more expensive than it should be.
Jeff, you're a good man. I like that.
Thank you.
I know. I don't know if we solved the world's wine pricing and wine rating system problems tonight, but we at least had a good chat about it.
Yeah.
So Susan Quinn is back, and Susan.
The
Well,
queen.
Yeah, the queen behind 5 o'clock
I've been
special.
keeping quiet tonight, been back behind the cameras and the switcher. Thank you, Jeff, so much, and I hope.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, you're awesome. It was a lot of fun. I love your fedora.
Thank you. This is actually my one of my trademarks. That being,
It works.
I like it.
So I just wanted to say, this is our last show for the 2-week pilot period. So we've been doing this show, Jeff, for 2 weeks, every night, Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock. And it's 5 o'clock in Napa Valley, and at 6 o'clock now in Napa Valley.
Yeah.
So that means it's 5 o'clock somewhere else. most likely.
Exactly.
There is a website that tells you that stuff. But I wanted to really quickly, thank everybody who's contributed to this crazy idea of ours, and which has been so much fun. We will be back February 11th for another 2-week stint after we have a powwow with all of our amazing hosts who've just showed up every day and brought us amazing content. And just want to thank some of the people that have been on the show.
Absolutely.
Chris Gillibo,
Yeah,
from
he was incredible.
He was.
the award-winning novelist writer has written $100 Startup, and was just so fascinating and brings us,
Absolutely.
the digital nomad lifestyle, and was really a lot of fun and great to meet him. Rolf Potts, who is
amazing travel writer.
Yeah, Vagabonding, and go to Vagablogging to find him. I'm sure everybody knows a lot more about him than they do about us, so it's easy to find him.
Like, we don't know who we are, but you'll know these guys.
Yeah.
Yes.
Alexa, who, we're not going to attempt your last name, it's on the website. It's Alexa, the CEO and co-founder of Food Spotting, which is a very popular app where it's like Instagram for food.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
a lot of other stuff going on about how you can find out where to find your dishes and what they look like and what people think about them. Same thing for Forkly, a slightly different app, but
Right,
it was
exactly.
awesome to have the two of them on. Brady Becker from Forkly, the co-founder of that app, was here with us too, and that was just great. To have the two of them was kind of a coup.
It really was, and it was
Really
such a fun show.
And it totally satisfied my tech startup side. It was really fun to talk
and
to
the
them.
food side.
Yeah.
Because it's all about food. So we got some good tips from them on new things to try and places to eat.
Yeah. And don't forget to have your husband, as Alexa does, turn on his brightness on his iPhone while she takes a picture. So there's no
That's right.
there's
That's
no
right.
flash.
Food
Yeah.
photography tips.
So
Yeah.
really great. Steve Dorsey, I don't really know how to describe him. He's the man who has stood in line for over a month to watch Star Wars and has taken his entire graphics design studio 2 lines in his lifetime to be first in line and to
That is dedication beyond my comprehension in some ways.
Yes.
You know, that's
and the culture of really caring about this is an event. And a lot of us don't watch movies in the theaters anymore. We're going home, we're watching them on our computer and Netflix, and there's a resurgence, as we know from Carrie Hardy and the Napa Valley Film Festival. People stand in line for 3 hours here in the beautiful Napa Valley, pay a lot of money to stand in line to watch a movie that they may not ever be able to see any other way.
Exactly.
So we thank Steve, and that's Dorsey Graphics or dropletcreative.com, and he's very talented. What can we say about Michael Jack Pasden? He's not a mixologist. He's a bartender, but he's more than that. Oh my gosh.
So much more.
He's like the Alton Brown of
Right,
spirit.
exactly.
He's so knowledgeable. Now, this is a man who comes onto Too Sweet as often as we can cajole him to. And he's mixing us things left and right, bringing on other amazing bartenders, as they like to be called.
Yeah.
And just telling us the history, the stories, the old European origins of, toast is actually because there used to be toast in the drink.
Right.
Stuff like that. So Michael Jack Pasden will be back. The guys from Zap, the Zinfandel advocates and producers.
They were fun.
They were
great.
fun. I don't think they knew.
Proud. Yes, they were great.
I don't think they knew what was going to happen.
They had no idea what they were getting into.
No idea.
Yeah, and they just had a blast. And they even asked a question of Lydia Mondavi, who is here for 29 Cosmetics.
Talking about grape seeds and the use in her cosmetics, so that was a different take on wine that night.
Yeah. The 29 Cosmetics. You can find 29cosmetics.com, I believe. You can find it.
Absolutely.
And fabulous products that made James look, a little bit younger.
James got 5 years
He
younger
looks
than me.
already,
James is another one of our hosts. Who's not
Actually,
here
boys
tonight,
should
but-
use that too.
And Ben
Flaviano.
Mahoney.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Flavio?
Oh, yes, Flaviano Cavorsa,
Yeah.
who is a chef, an Italian chef who has restaurants in Mexico and Italy. He has an Italian restaurant, a Sicilian restaurant in Mexico, and an Italian
A Mexican
restaurant.
restaurant.
A Mexican, yeah. You know,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes,
that.
it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was having trouble with that night too. So, you know, it was wonderful to have him here and to hear he's going to be opening a space near us. So hopefully he'll be here in person
Yeah.
too.
Very
The food is
excited.
absolutely beautiful. I can't wait to try some of it.
Absolutely.
And Ben Mahoney from the Napa Valley Film Festival,
Yes.
who is a great friend of ours and will be back as well. And that, last but not least, the host who make it all happen. Ian White, he did take his shirt off for us. He may do it again.
I think he likes taking his shirt off. I don't think
Yeah.
that's a coach.
I think there's a small exhibitionist in there somewhere.
Yeah. Napa Valley Life magazine, 7x7 magazine, and the Eat Mischievous Inc. section. There's a party coming up on February 10th that I hope everybody has a chance to go to for Mischievous Inc. at the Ondog Hotel.
So many people.
I know.
Yeah.
I know, but this
He's
is a long
getting
list.
bored.
But it's like it's great to hear all this because it's even reminding me and
What we've
all
been
of us
through.
what we've done in the last 2 weeks.
And it's been a lot.
Wow,
Yeah, there's
this is a
more.
lot.
I'm not done.
Oh.
I should thank DDA,
Of
who
course.
I have to say,
Yay.
don't be angry with me, but it is ADD backwards. He can't handle this. He's ready to go. It's like, okay, enough. Okay, but I'm going to keep going because it's only fair. Christine Trice from OMG,
Yes.
I so need a glass
Yes.
of wine or I'm going to sell my kid, who has hundreds of thousands of Facebook followers just to talk about what really matters with no judgment. And, you know, she
Yeah,
brought
what
some
it's like
wine
to be
here.
a mom.
Yeah,
and just
share-
the frustrations and the good times and the times when you just need a glass of wine, even
Just
if it's
to
for breakfast.
smooth it over. Yeah.
You can tell by her Facebook number, there's people out there that want to, you know, relate to each other.
Right,
And she does
exactly.
that very, very well. And she's so sweet, and she'll be back as well. Another host, James Taylor, who
Yes.
has brought us the most amazing guests. I mean, and he
Absolutely.
has more in store for us, and that's just
He has
awesome. He's with Artist Works, which is an online music school, and teaches you how to play music by the top people in the industry.
Yeah.
And he does play
He's
drums
quite
sometimes
good.
with members of the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
So you never know who might
Yeah.
be stopping by.
Exactly.
Alison Burns, who is actually James' wife. They're both Scottish.
Yes.
And they brought us a beautiful show on Burns Night where we got to talk about the haggis and hear a beautiful song by Alison, who is a famous jazz singer.
Absolutely.
And I think we need to go back and ask her how it was to sing for Prince William and Kate Middleton on the eve
we
of their,
totally need to talk about that.
We do.
of their
Absolutely.
engagement at the
Yeah.
Queen's house, which was actually so-called, also known as Windsor Castle.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay, I'm getting poked in the back.
No.
I'm sorry, I'd like several more people. Oh, you're grabbing my hair? Okay. And Chris Christopherson, we have a little digging to do there to find out a little more about Chris. Chris Christopherson is our local, beloved fishmonger from Osprey Seafood Market in Napa, and has brought us,
He brought us caviar last night.
caviar
champagne.
and
Bubbles.
champagne last night.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, maybe Michael doesn't know that.
It doesn't get better.
Michael has watched the show. His boss, Michael, has a monthly show here on Toot Sweet as well, to tell us, how to eat, how to know where your food comes from. Very similar to Deline, our meat master.
Absolutely.
The master of meat, Deline Vollenweider, and
An owner of fabulous cowboy boots. I'm only sorry that she doesn't have any on this evening.
Oof.
It's the first time
It's
I
the
think.
first time I've been without
But
boots.
if you want to see a picture, I tweeted a photo out last night. She is a collector of the
they're
most
fabulous.
amazing boots.
Harlequin,
Seven
Yeah.
Harlequin cowboy boots,
Yes.
and we are going to start a trend by taking pictures
Of her boots. Yeah.
They
You're
are
not.
beautiful. Not my size, damn. She
Lucky
offered
me.
she offered to share. Carrie Hardy, the lovely,
Yeah.
who is in New
And
York right
bubbly.
now. Yeah,
Yes,
lovely,
and bubbly.
and super smart as a whip, you
Yes.
know?
Yes.
And she's with the Napa Valley Film Festival. We'll be bringing us even more fun, cool
Yeah.
stuff coming up.
Mhm.
Um,
Great to call in from New York last night.
Off the chilly street.
Off the
Sounds
freezing
cool.
cold streets of New York. Yeah.
Yeah. And then last but not
Johnny.
least, PDA,
You, Johnny.
Eileen. Oh, Johnny.
Yes, Johnny Mota.
Johnny
Yes.
Mota.
And
I'm
Tia.
sorry. Yeah, you know, I'm getting there.
Don't leave Tia out. No, it's not.
Johnny Mota, who is our, he doesn't want to be called a guru or a ninja, so it's hard. I have to think of
A ninja's a
The
good word
tech
for
nerd,
him.
is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, he travels around and attends a lot of the technology and is just bringing us.
He gets all the cool
aspect.
gadgets, ahead of everyone. So
Yeah, the Google goggles.
yeah, he
and
got to come tell us about some of the things
Google
that he had recently
Yeah,
received.
yeah. So we'll have more from Johnny coming up soon too. Delene, Tia, Tia Butt, who
Thank
has
you.
future hair.
Thank you. No, it's been great fun.
Yeah, I can't wait to delve into the next season in
Absolutely.
February. So February, Boris Guillaume, thank you for. One day, Boris said, "Hey, I have an idea. You guys should do a nightly show at 5 o'clock and call it 5 o'clock somewhere." And I just sent an email to all of you guys.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have a name for this thing.
Exactly.
Of course, you're not going to believe this, but I have it all set up. We didn't have a name. So Boris is
perfect.
a fabulous wine expert, and we'll be back as well. Yeah.
And thanks, Jeff, for helping
Thank you,
close
Jeff.
out our first of our last day of our first 2 weeks. So thank you.
No, my pleasure. This was such a treat. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it. Thank you.
And Jeff, in general, we do like those shows like usually come in on Fridays, and if you have nothing to do that day or at that time of the day, and you have something that we have something like this really cool that you think that you may bring something or you want to discuss and meet, log in and join us, and we love to see you again.
Thank you. I will do that, and we can talk about American regional wine made not in California. I'm sure that'll go over very well with Napa.
There you
We
go.
love that. That would be so fun. Yeah.
Just like Logan, that's easy. You see, he went. That was pretty easy, right?
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share.
Yes.
All right.
I'll grab that one.
Have a toast?
That's one.
Yes.
All right.
Right.
Cheers.
So,
Cheers.
thank you, everybody.
Cheers. Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.
And we'll see you next time on 5 o'clock somewhere.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.